part of what we did with our sustainability verifications, we sort of changed the definition of what is responsible sourcing, because
Nice.
once we fixed all these methodological challenges, we found that there are a lot of issues out there. In fact, we've done a statistical sample of about 7 million farms out there. I don't think we've yet found a farm that actually meets all 30 standards.
Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and today on the podcast is our final episode of the series with David Browning from Enveritas. Today we are talking regenerative agriculture and the next frontier of that. So David, tell us about what Enveritas is doing with regards to regenerative agriculture.
Well, one of the things we didn't talk about in the previous podcast, but along the way as we were solving other problems, we also sort of retweaked and re-engineered how agronomy training could get provided to farmers, and worked out how to increase the quality and lower the cost. Again, with something that was a little bit counterintuitive, and that was to add a layer of management. Whenever you think about reducing costs, you might instantly leap to, well, you've got to get rid of layers. But in this case, actually what turned out to be more effective was to have really strong agronomists, but give them more leverage, give them effectively more span. And so adding in this additional layer so that their really great advice could reach more farmers. It took more work because now you've got a bigger management pyramid, but it ended up being much more cost effective and allowed us to be able to do good work. And that agronomy, we eventually worked out a model where we could get 30 to 50% increases in yield by doing an 18-month training program. So the training program itself was not, it wasn't particularly revolutionary. It was probably the same things that an agronomist might have gone to a farm to talk in the 1950s. So it was things like pruning and weeding and mulching. But working out how to do that at scale, that was where really the magic of the teams that I've led, they really shone, and they worked out how to. And again, I wouldn't even try and take credit for how they re-engineered that and built it, but to build a system which could do agronomy training at scale effectively and get 30 to 50% yield increases. Which is important because not only does that change farmers' lives, but it turns out that is actually an incredibly high return on investment. I mean, for a philanthropic dollar spent, it is more effective to do that than to give, for example, an unconditional cash transfer. It's more, it's better than school feeding lunches or a host of other things. And one of the things I did along the way was I was very curious about what is the best way we can spend money. We're trying to work on this issue of poverty, but there's scarce resources. So I was constantly looking for a given amount of philanthropic dollars, how can we best use that to make a change to people's lives? And it turned out this agronomy program was a real hit. Now, while this was happening, the world was coming to regenerative agriculture, which a lot of your listeners would have heard about, and it seems to promise this exciting new destination, which seems to take care of helping farmers increase their income while also helping the environment and taking care of carbon footprints. So it's understandable that it's incredibly it's got a lot of excitement. A lot of big companies have taken that on board, and they're setting very large goals around that. And if you go to any sort of coffee conference, you'll sort of hear it on people's lips. And so we have been diving into that space to understand what would that actually mean and how could you actually make that work. But bringing to it all of this knowledge that's been built up about because part of this process is rejuvenation, and that's a part of this regenerative agricultural promise, which is how can you take care of the land, take care of the environment, take care of the farmers' livelihoods. It is more challenging than it first appears on the outside. The agronomy worked well, but there's a couple of places where where we're not able to unlock those gains. One of those is in Ethiopia, because the trees are much older there, and so they don't respond as easily in some countries. Just doing the agronomy training without any investment on the part of the farmer, without any investing in fertilizer or anything like that, you can get these yield increases. And that was the intent, to design a program where what farmers have is they have passion, and they have their hands, they can work. That what they don't have necessarily is a whole lot of spare cash to risk on new investments.
Inputs.
But if we could transfer knowledge, and then they could work on their farms and get yield increases, then you could get a path out of poverty. In fact, I was in Rwanda a couple of years ago, and went back to meet a farmer who had been part of that Gates project back in 2007. And I said, how's it gone? They were earning about $80 a year, and I think a tenth of a hectare probably when we started. And I said, did you, how's it going? She said, good. I said, did you manage to get your kids through elementary school? Because it's about $10 or $20 a year for even though it's free, there's still some costs for parents. And then secondary education is even more. Maybe it's a couple $100 a year per child, and of course college is even more. It's like $500. So I said, "Were you able to get any of your kids through secondary school?" She said, "Oh yeah, no, they've all gone through secondary school." She said, they're going to university. I said, how are they going to university? It's like $80 a year. University's $500 a year. I said, well, we absorbed the knowledge. We took action. Yields went up. So that was exciting. So then we went back and really scoured everything that had been transmitted to us, and really implemented it, to the fullest, 110% energy. And so then the yields went up even more, because the average. But if you do everything really, really well, then the yield potential is 300%, 400%. So suddenly their yields were up maybe 300%. I said, well, that's great, but that's still not really enough to get your kids through university. No, but then we had so much money that we could buy another piece of land. So then that doubled again. So then 300% became 600%. And then we had enough money for the first two to go to college to study. I think it was medicine. I think.
Wow.
So she was studying, and I said, okay. And he said, but once the first one was in university, well, then it sort of became the expectation of the younger kids, and so all the siblings, mentally, that everything sort of shifts. It's sort of like, well, I guess we'll go to college. So that sort of changes their approach to schooling and education, and they're working hard. And so then the second one performed really well academically and got a free ride, got a scholarship. So that paid for the second one. And then by the time the third one's going to come along, the first child will have finished. And so then that money can be applied to the third. And she said it's going to be tight, but yeah, we'll have to tighten the belt here and there, but we're pretty comfortable. We'll be able to get all the kids through, which is extraordinary. So that's the model of agronomy. And again, we're not trying to get 300% yield increase for everyone, but if we do it with 10,000 farmers, our expectation is that some farmers will not implement, some will implement to some degree, and some will be just absolute rock stars and implement everything to an extraordinary degree.
Can I ask you on that? When you have intentional problem solving like this, very clearly you've just demonstrated a story where your solutions were met with the grit of somebody who wanted the problem solved and were prepared to show up and match your efforts. How often does that happen? Is that the standard kind of experience that you guys have, or is that not so much the standard?
Yeah, I think the very first day I started with, the first week I started with TechServe back in 2003. I flew El Salvador, and I met some farmers who were very similar to ones I just described. They're just extraordinarily committed. They had endured a lot in their life. They showed me the bomb crater.
Wow.
Where a fighter jet had come hunting for them because in all that there's a war always somewhere going on in the coffee world, but at a point in the past there had been the decision that the guerrilla army was being supported by the whole rural landscape, and so the way to drain the swamp was to actually target individual rural households. So they knew that if they heard the scream of the jet, they needed to run. So they ran, and a fighter jet with I can't even imagine how much a missile cost for a fighter jet took out their little 1-bedroom hut. So the hole is still there, but they've just carried on and they just
rebuilt next to it.
Rebuilt and charging, and so the staff member who showed me around, I said, how did you find these guys? Like, they are literally, they're up at 4 a.m. and they're just soaking up like a sponge and enthusiastic and implementing everything. I said, how did you find these guys? And they said, well, it was pretty easy. We came to the village and we said, we're here, we're going to do a project, and we're here to help. So anyone who wants help, come to the town hall tonight at 8:00. Everyone from 10 miles around comes, because
wow,
there might be a free T-shirt, who knows, but there's something on offer. And the team stood up and said, well, here's the bad news. They said, there's no hats, there's no free lunches, there's no free sodas. And if you work with us, you'll probably have to work harder than you've worked before. But we will promise you there's higher income at the end of this. And we'll be back again tomorrow night at 8:00. And then the next night, there's a much, much smaller group in the room. And these two guys had come early before the meeting started because they wanted to talk to the team, and they loitered after the meeting ended to talk to the team. And they said, those are our guys. So it's this fairly simple but very powerful idea that people are quite different in their motivations and where they are on the adoption curve. I think a lot of projects that come in to help, because they come from a high level and because it's all being crafted sort of on paper as opposed to spending time with people on the ground, there's a tendency to just see farmers as this big homogenous mass, coffee farm. There's 12 million, they're all the same. But the reality is there's a lot of farmers who should not have worked with us. They might be an elderly widow who's has very little in the way of income, and these people just stroll in, off the horizon, promising grand ideas and new approaches. That's probably a bad idea for someone in that situation to take that on. That's just too risky. It'd be far better to let someone else do it, wait 2 years, see if it works, and if it does work, then implement it. And by the way, now you've got a set of people around you who actually know what to do, that you could ask for help. So seeing the world as not just vanilla, but there are people who are either predisposed to want to try innovation or take more risk, or they might have more resources, but start with them. It's time and time again over the last 20 years, I'll talk to farmers who really wanted to, they're excited about coffee, they really wanted to take on new techniques and have that increase in incomes. And they'll say the turning point is the motorbike. This is when I start driving around on a motorbike, then my neighbors come and want to work on my farm.
Right. because that's the wealth, kind of the measure of wealth.
Because if you've been living in a world where for the past 40 years you've walked to the market, right, and then you suddenly see that your neighbor can ride a motorbike and save 2 hours, that's a very meaningful change in life circumstances. And so at that point, that becomes the proof point. So we could show up in a village and talk all day, but most people would be very right to be mistrustful. But once they see the neighbor and they see the motorbike, there's a realization of, okay, there's something real going on here. And then they actually offer to work on the farm and understand these new techniques and then apply themselves. And we very much see that as the natural organic process. We're not there to just pick people.
You're not being saviors.
Yeah, we're not trying to just go in and pick everyone the same. We're trying to specifically find the people who can be those early leaders, early adopters, early catalysts. And so I think that mentality was probably put embedded in Technoserve very early on by the founder, Ed Bullard, who sort of who's a fascinating guy in his own right. But he's a young guy, and he just in the 60s, he just sort of felt like he was going to do it differently, and he wanted to do something. He cared about poverty, and he said, we're not going to give things away. We're just going to give knowledge. So because if you give knowledge, people have to act on it. But if we give these other things away, we don't know whether people are showing up to get the thing or whether they're here because they want to. So I think that was why that approach of embedding, I think, was quite powerful. At least from my point of view, is very powerful in terms of its ability to have much more dramatic effects. So that's the long-term process with agronomy. But that threads into this new hope, which is regenerative agriculture, which adds a whole lot of new complex threads. One of them being you now need to understand much more about carbon in the soil, which means you have to be able to measure that. Measuring soil organic carbon, which has everyone quite excited. They're hoping that the hope is that if you do the right thing with the farm and with soil, that a healthier soil will actually trap carbon at such grand scale that can actually make a meaningful difference to overall CO2 levels. But for that, hope we realize we're going to have to work out how to measure it, and it's non-trivial because you can't just measure at the surface. You have to get down to 30 centimeters and then 50 centimeters. Then you have to work out how to get it to a good lab and make sure everything's standardized. So that's challenge number one. But challenge number two is that for all of this to work, certainly in a few places in the coffee world, you really are going to have to rejuvenate the farm. You're going to have to either stump or plant. And the model, the business model does not support that. It may well be a good thing to do in the long run, but if you stump, you lose that income of that tree for
3 years.
And there isn't really a mechanism of how you will actually compensate the farmer to such a degree that they'll be able to undertake these things. And this is, it's we're not talking about a small amount of money. It's thousands of. So we'll sort of finish, I guess, this podcast with an unsolved question, which is what we're working on now. So that is what's in the R&D lab now, is to work out, given that this is very much unsolvable, that how can you get a very large amount of money, get it to farmers so they can do the renovation that they would need to do if we want to unlock all of this regenerative agricultural promise. How are we actually going to make that work? What will be the financing mechanism? Because people have been talking about financing coffee smallholders for a long time. Certainly, I've been talking about it from the day I walked into the industry 20 years ago. But that is, you go and talk to a bank and ask them how easy it is to lend money to coffee farmers when every 5 or 6 years the bottom drops out of the market. That's a very challenging business for a bank. So that's going to have to be reinvented, and of course, maybe in some future podcast we'll be able to come back and someone on my team is working on that as we speak, and we'll have to try and find the answers.
I can't wait. I'm so excited about what you guys are doing, and I'm so excited that you exist in the industry. Thank you for what you guys are doing. Again, folks, this is not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. I'm just a fangirl I'm a fan of people who are doing shit and are not just talking about it. And from everything that I've seen about what Enveritas is doing, they're empowering people to be their own heroes. And I'm a big fan of that behavior as well. So Thanks for what you guys are doing. Thank you for leading the way that you're leading, and for being an inspiration to people who want to be problem solvers within our industry and within our world. It's a hopeful position to be in. So thank you for that. Now, if people want to, I guess, get in contact with you or want to learn more about what Enveritas is doing and how they may be able to engage with that, what's the best way to do that?
So we have they can, on our website, they can find there's an email address to reach out to us on. If people are interested in working for us, then we always welcome hearing from people. We always need great, passionate people. If for coffee shops out there, small roasters, we are, as we speak, maybe a seventh podcast. We're working out. We work with the slightly larger specialty roasters like the Stumptowns, Intelligentsias, but there's a whole passionate crowd of specialty roasters that are at slightly smaller volume, and we're working out how can we build a product. Part of what we did with our sustainability verifications, we sort of changed the definition of what is responsible sourcing, because
Nice.
once we fixed all these methodological challenges, we found that there are a lot of issues out there. In fact, we've done a statistical sample of about 7 million farms out there. I don't think we've yet found a farm that actually meets all 30 standards.
Folks, our first on-demand workshop, How to Become a Coffee Consultant, is now available for you to learn at your own pace for just €50, and it comes with a certificate upon completion. Go to mapitforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the show notes for more details. Support this podcast by supporting our sponsors.
So
wow.
So those things are aspirational. They are not the norm for farms to do it. But we said, rather than try and hold farmers to this idealistic standard that they cannot meet, at least we haven't found a farm yet that can meet it. Let's change the way we think about this issue. We said, so roasters will to get a sustainable sourcing claim, you first have to actually have this rigorous and an honest audit and across your supply chain, so you truly understand what's going on. But you actually have to invest in problem solving. So that was new. Historically, you paid your money for labeling fee, you got the stamp, and you were done. We're saying you're not done when you've done the verification. You've got to actually commit very significant resources to start to work on these issues. We don't expect you to fix every issue overnight, but we do expect you to start to work on issues, and we'll actually define, based on the scale of your operation, what you can do. And that's proven to be wildly successful. So companies really, because coffee companies out there, large or small, they're full of people who care about the industry, care about farmers. It's just been very hard historically for them to work out what they can do about it. But it's getting very strong response, this idea that they can go back to their companies, they can lobby these resources, and then actually get worked on the ground. Now, the problem we hit once we get to a smaller company is they just don't have the resources to go off and find projects. They in every place they might buy a small amount of coffee from 4 continents, and so they're not in a position where they can have a sustainability manager who can go out and design projects. So what we're working on now is an ability for those roasters that are a little bit less volume to be able to afford to put someone in place, where we can create the pool where they can bring their funding, and we'll construct a group project for them. So that's
that's exciting.
So in that way, all they really need to bring is passion, and then a couple of cents per pound. But then they don't have to actually create all of the internal things. So it's in the works. We're not able to launch that now because we've got to
fixing the EU and all that kind of stuff.
But for people who are interested in Veritas, that's coming down the pipe. For those of you interested in the EU regulation, as I mentioned, we are hoping to be able to engage with the EU and lay out, this is how we'd like to approach the problem. And we're talking now with governments, origin governments. If any origin governments are listening, very happy to sit down and talk to you about how we supposed to do this. if that can be put in place, then the EU regulation will become quite straightforward for exporters of any size, because then they'll be able to log into a portal, they'll be able to get the certification they need and get it, and then put their shipments to Europe. But so that's sort of the ones going on there. In terms of verification itself, yes, that's again at this moment where we're servicing large roasters and those specialty players that are probably of a size like Stumptown Intelligentsia, but coming soon. As we expand, we're able to get deeper in the industry, because we know we talk to so many people out there, and certainly our ideal would be to get to the point where a single mom and pop shop can who is passionate about wanting to help and can say, yep, I want to lean into this, show me how it can help, and try and make it really plug and play for them, where they can have some satisfaction that they're contributing as part of a much larger ecosystem to helping protect the environment for the next generation and helping smaller incomes. So it's on our way. Be patient with us, but the team's furiously working on that as well.
Thank you for solving and at least trying to solve all the problems that you're trying to solve. It's again, it's really inspiring. Folks, we will have links in the show notes for everything as well. We will make sure that there's links to some of the videos that David referred to in previous episodes, so that you can see some of the projects that they worked on. Just super inspiring. David, would you do me the great honor of signing off this episode with peace, love, and peanut butter?
Before I start off, I also just want to tip my hat to Lee. It's she was telling me in before the podcast how often she's doing these and how she packages them, and I'm in awe of just the commitment and the work that it must take to do this. But again, it's super important to creating this remarkable conduit and this remarkable voice for.
Thank you, sir.
So I tip my hat. But with
Thank
that.
you.
Let me sign off. Peace, love, and peanut butter.
Have an amazing rest of your day, everyone. Thank you again, David. Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, friends. There are 2 ways you can support this podcast. Firstly, become a paid member of our YouTube channel. Secondly, you can join our Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video before you leave, and check the show notes for more information. Now, this is what you should check out next.